So welcome to the special issue of cognitive and applied aging. We are the three guest editor for the British Journal of Developmental Psychology of that special issue. First, we'd like to just to briefly introduce ourselves. Maybe Laurie can start.
Sure. So I'm Laurie James. I'm a professor at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. My training is in cognitive psychology, but since the beginning of my training, almost all of my research has had an aging component. And so I really focus on cognitive aging. I work with a bunch of people in my department of psychology that also study aging, and also a broader group of people at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, who form the Gerontology Center, which is an academic unit. So there's a lot of interest in aging in my work and in my colleagues' work. And so it's an exciting area for me to be involved in.
Hi, I'm Stacey Wood, and I'm a professor at Scripps College in Claremont. And my training is in neuropsychology, but I've also focused on aging from an early part of my career, both as a clinician and as a professor. In Claremont, there's a lot of older adults. It's a retirement community, so it's been a good setting to have a program of research focused on improving the well-being of older adults.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Hanoch. I'm at the University of Southampton. I've been working with Stacey for many years now. My interest is more in the applied perspective of decision-making and risk-taking, more or less across the lifespan. I've done work with from children all the way to older adults, and that was partially what brought us together. But we had a number of more concrete reasons why we had decided to do the special issue. So first, as Laurie at one meeting said, that we are passionate about the topic. Right, Laurie?
Absolutely, right. I think doing research in aging is super important, but it's also a lot more fun, and it raises a lot more interesting questions than many people initially assume. And so developing that passion and inspiring that passion in other people has been one of the highlights of my career.
Hopefully other people are as passionate or will be as passionate after watching our special issue. But we had also other reasons. One is that almost aging touches every domain in our life. So whether you are a health professional, obviously COVID highlighted at this point. Economists are interested in that, from saving, retirement, and spending. Obviously, we as psychologists, sociologists, and obviously lay people as well are keen to learn more about aging. So there is a widespread interest from almost every corner of academic and non-academic domain.
And of course, there's a lot of applied interest in this topic as well. We often hear about statistics, how older adults, especially the oldest old, it's the rapidly growing demographic in society, and will bring with it certain challenges and opportunities.
Of course, economic, health, social, policy, well-being, and again, COVID made it all more poignant and important. So there are enough reasons, in our mind at least, why aging is of importance, why the journal will be interested in the special issue. And finally, it's the journal's actually interest. So it does want to broaden the journal scope. So that's one of the aims of the special issue, is to have a sort of a message to other researchers that they can start submitting and papers to the journal, that it's open to, because it typically was more of a children or young adults were submission there. So it's really the journal and the society, the British Psychological Society, really encourages submission of papers that take a lifespan and aging related topics. which.
So now we're going to turn to talking about some of the wonderful submissions that are included in the special issue. And we were fortunate to have really a broad range of topics. So we had papers from cognitive psychology, social psychology, decision-making, and even those that took some physiological measures across the lifespan.
Yeah, this one on the screen here by Cherry et al. Is a good example of one that studied more basic cognitive processes. And so they were interested in how different types of cognitive processing relate to each other, including encoding, retrieval from memory, and as well as some other cognitive functions, and how all of this relates to each other in middle-aged and older adults, which is the new piece. So some of these relationships have been studied in young adulthood before, but extending them across the lifespan to see what's stable and what changes was a nice contribution of this paper. And similarly, this one also looked at cognitive functions and a range of different measures. But this time, this group of authors looked at how cognitive control, right, or your thoughts about how much you're able to control or how much you're able to control your cognitive processing, how that impacts different types of cognitive functions across adulthood, not just in young adults.
And kind of related to some of the themes from the last paper, this paper talks about how your awareness of perceived age-related changes impacts performance. And so what's been interesting looking at these papers is that there are some that sort of document changes in aging, but others really that are looking at effects that might be able to be mediated or improved to optimize the experience of older adults.
And this work by Lopez Perez and McLaugh, I hope I pronounce it correctly, extend our work in studies about emotional goals and well-being across the lifespan. Again, another example of not looking just on a more slice of the population, but really looking at different age groups and looking again what changes and what remains stable with regard to our emotional goals. Do we want to stay happy the same? Is our well-being changes across the life? And maybe there could be now expanding it, people who might be interested in expanding it to how COVID have influenced that, given the well-being and issues about goals, emotional goals that people might have under these unusual and conditions.
And this last paper looked at decision-making across age groups, and again found some stability and also some change. While older adults tended to be riskier in some conditions, that wasn't true under all conditions. So I know for the three of us talking offline, we've often chatted about stereotypes of aging and how important developing empirical research is to challenge that and really to understand the nuances that are involved in cognition and aging.
One thing to maybe putting it in somewhat context is the presidential campaign that we just witnessed in the US, how two individuals, two males in their mid to late 70s defy all stereotypes, their cognitive capacity, although that was challenged at some point about Biden capacity by Trump. These are individuals that are willing and able to run a country, to make decisions, to remember things, to deal with people, to negotiate, to do a whole host of things that many of us young people cannot do So this is a really good, I like to look at the campaign and the presidency as an example of where many issues about older adults might be refuted or challenged, or interesting to see how individuals at that age actually make decisions, deal with their emotions, set goals, memories, etc. So
Absolutely. The whole set of papers that we have here highlight that, of course, the stereotypes are too simple, right? And help us to understand whether, you know, when we look at somebody like Joe Biden, are we looking at somebody who's an exemplary case of aging, or are we looking at something that many older adults should expect to happen? And I think, you know, looking at the research is really the way that we want people to go in terms of what they should expect as they start to grow older.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess, a little disappointing to see how prevalent ageism still is, with the sort of stereotype of an older person being kindly but not competent, right? You know, trying to apply that to someone like a Joe Biden. So I agree, it's important to really to look at the data and to understand the nuances involved in aging.
our last message is just to capture the idea of the joy of guest editing a special issue. It was a great pleasure working with Lori and Stacey, working with the authors. Thank you for all the reviewers that worked diligently and provided us with input. So whoever is thinking about guest editing, I personally highly encourage it. A really a learning experience, a good learning experience so far, and hopefully some of the papers would lend themselves to for others in thinking about future directions that they want to take. And as I mentioned, we're already glad to see that the special issue has started to yield a few papers coming to the journal. So the more the merrier.